Hey everybody, welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I'm your host, G1. As always, hope you're having a good week. It's been a very hot one here, very stormy, a lot of volatile thunderstorms causing all kinds of issues with my power and my internet. So I'm getting this episode out late this week. Unfortunately, my internet's been bouncing still this afternoon. It's just been I didn't know if I would have time to, or have the ability to get everything uploaded and recorded without storm in the background. But anyway, I'm able to get it done now. So here we are. I wanted to start the show off to say that we got some very bad news yesterday evening. If you've not already heard, longtime blogger and political commentator Z-Man passed away yesterday, reportedly from natural causes. We don't know much else. I don't know much else at this time. But if you were a fan of the Z-Blog, as I was, this is a tough one. This is right after Old Remus. This is a bad one. Concerned American, often linked to Z-Blog, especially on the old WRSA site, WRSA sites, and Z-Man commented in the comments section, so he was kind of a fixture of WRSA, the old crew, for a long time. So this is sad news indeed, and we wish his family well. Perhaps when you get a chance, have a moment of silence for him. Say a little prayer for him. Now, moving on from that sad bit of news, I want to get into a couple of things that are taking place on the national level. First off, the NFA provisions that were in the big beautiful bill were surreptitiously removed by the Senate parliamentarian. Who the hell is that? And how do they get the power to tell the Senate what they can and cannot vote on? Well, apparently it's an appointed position, and this particular person is a female Democrat who's been filling the role for about 12 years, and she not only removed the provisions that would have done away with the NFA tax on suppressors and short-barreled rifles, which would have essentially taken them off the NFA, period. She took out also the provisions for ending the SNAP benefits for illegal aliens, for clamping down on that and really putting a stop to that. And she did this because she says that they're not budget related. So I want you to just stop and marinate on that for a few minutes. So a tax and a reduction in federal expenditures are not budget items, according to this brain surgeon that is filling this position. Right. Well, thankfully, this has caused an uproar, and I have to imagine that the phones are ringing off the hook at the Capitol, because this was, for one, it took a lot to get those provisions put into the House bill. Okay, that was a very contentious point in the House. It took a lot of effort, a lot of work by Gun Owners of America, people calling in, grassroots effort to put the pressure on Congress to keep these provisions in the big beautiful bill. This was a very solid shot at getting a big chunk of the NFA overturned. And now an unelected functionary has decided unilaterally that if we're going to keep these in the bill because they're not really budget related, they're procedural or they're policy, it's going to require a 60 vote individual vote on, like an amendment, to put it back into the bill. No. She's doing this because there's no way we were going to get 60 votes on those. There's just not enough Democrats, there's not enough of a majority to get that to happen. But if they're left in the bill as it is, you only need 51 votes to pass it. So she's trying to sync these items to pull this out on the Senate version of the bill, which it still would have to go to reconciliation between the House to get both the bills lined up. So things aren't over yet, but she's trying to sync this. So can this woman, can her, just get rid of her, okay? Put someone else in that will restore these items to the bill so it can be voted on before July the 4th. That is the message that needs to be sent to Congress, to the Senate. Get rid of this lady. Second item. In an epic smackdown, absolutely epic smackdown, between Supreme Court justices, the court ruled today that judges do not have the authority to issue national injunctions. This is something that really should not have even needed to be debated about. This is logical. This is not it's not how the founders set things up. But this puts an end to these activist judges who have been judge shopped, issuing these injunctions that are effectively putting an end to the president's agenda. This ruling contained in the written statements issued by the majority just an absolutely epic destruction of Justice Ketanji Brown. And it's clear if you read this and understand it is in some very heavy legal jargon. It's kind of thick, but it is a public demonstration of just how dumb Ketanji Brown is. She clearly was put in the court by President Biden as a diversity hire. She lacks the intellectual horsepower to even argue before the court, much less sit on it. Really, she should resign in shame. I mean, it is bad. Go read the ruling, see it for yourself. And that is not even to mention how awesome this is for the efforts taking place and a refutation of the lawfare that the left has waged against the administration and its agenda. Hopefully now we will see movement and all of these aspects of the Trump agenda that people voted for. This is what people put him in office for, and he's been trying to do it, and these judges have said, oh, no, I have the power to stop this. And they've been smacked down repeatedly, even as those cases worked their way up through the court. They were getting smacked down. No, you don't have the power to stop this. No, that's not the way it says. The president has the power to do this. Da-da-da-da-da. Over and over again. But maybe this will finally get the ball rolling on things like the mass deportations and end to birthright citizenship that Trump has been pushing and working for. And that brings us back to the events of last weekend, which I want to close with today. There's been a lot made about President Trump over the last week and how he handled this situation in Iran with Israel. Last week, as I ended the show, I was hopeful that the president would not act in haste and he would wait to see how things developed before launching an attack. I, like many of you, was gravely concerned that we would be pulled into committing ground troops, or at least an ever increasingly escalating conflict that would just draw us in further and further financially at the least. Well, where are we right now? We're not in a protracted conflict, at least that we see so far. We're not putting troops on the ground. We don't have our ships being fired on in the Straits of Hormuz. I could go on and on here, but I think you guys are getting the point. It's not happening. A lot of criticism has been hurled at the president, and much of it was well-deserved, but I want to shy away from that. I don't want to slam him and really be super critical. I think there's enough of that going on out there. And I'm not going to praise him either, because I think this could have been done in an entirely different manner, and with the same outcome that did not compromise some of the international capital that I think the president had, the trust that he had built up with someone like Putin in these other situations. I think we spent a lot of capital here that shows other people in other conflicts and other disputes that Donald Trump is not as trustworthy as he might have appeared to begin with at the beginning of or in his last administration. But what I want you all to do is to take a step back and look at this from kind of 30,000 feet and understand that what you saw play out last weekend was Kayfabe. And if you do not understand that term, I have defined it on the show before. I've talked about it, but I'll go into it a little bit more detail here. So I think you need to get that term understood to really see where we went and where you need to be on this in your thinking. The term is from professional wrestling, and it's used to define the public story or the public facing aspects of the industry. It's the narrative and the story arcs and the characters and their ups and their downs and the rivalries. It's all of the show that you see in the ring and in the arena. That is the kayfabe. But that is not what goes on behind the scenes and backstage and in between shows. Now make no mistake, there are times when some of these wrestlers genuinely dislike or even hate each other, and those matches are more real than you might think that they are. But those are the exceptions. For the most part, the majority of the time, these guys are friends with one another, that they're getting out there fighting. They are exerting themselves. It is real athleticism, and sometimes they get hurt. It's real pain. It's just like a professional sport. But the punches are pulled, and the slams only sound like they hurt, right? Because they're not really trying to kill each other out there, right? They're really buddies. They really are friends with one another. They like one another in general. Donald Trump understands that politics, and even international global politics, is kayfabe. Sometimes it really does break out into real devastating war when it gets out of their control. But especially after World War II, the international elite learned that they could maintain the appearance of conflict and even occasionally have a real fight when they really wanted to punish somebody or really get rid of somebody, who was going against the grain. They could do that and still publicly have this show, and while they were maintaining behind the stage presence and friendships and alliances and all of these things, when the people that they're supposed to be morally and diametrically opposed to. I think they learned that lesson really even prior to World War II. Woodrow Wilson talked about this and kind of hinted at this. But it took a little bit of time before it really got put into practice. And I think it goes back much earlier than that, much further back. But I don't think it was played out on a global scale way back. I think that really took place during World War I, and it really took off and really became a thing after World War II. I think World War II got out of control, became this real devastating conflict, and I think after that they said, look, we can't have that happen again. We've got to have this thing going on publicly that makes it look like we're still hating each other and we're still ready to manipulate and do all these things, but we really can't have it go that far anymore. And I think Donald Trump understands this. And he learned how to be an expert at kayfabe from an expert, a man named Vince McMahon, the guy that runs World Wrestling Entertainment, used to be the WWF. For some time, many years ago, Donald Trump had a run playing himself in the WWE. He participated in the storylines of the show. He was like a character on the show. And he's a longtime friend with Vince McMahon and his wife, Linda. I think they got a divorce, but at the time they would have been married. But at any rate, Linda McMahon is the Secretary of Education now in the Trump administration. So he's well versed in how this goes. And what you saw last week, I believe, was Donald Trump kind of doing an end run around the Israelis. I think he worked something out with Iran. Now, we all know that Israel has influence on our government that far outweighs and outproportions the size of the country, and some would argue that they have de facto control over our country, and I think the way they do sometimes myself. But I think that has its limitations. Okay, I don't think it's outright full control over things. But much has been made also about Trump being, Netanyahu's pet dog and all of that. But I don't buy that. And I offer as evidence what we saw last weekend. We saw Donald Trump launch an attack on 3 facilities in Iran. We've been told that these attacks were successful. We've also been told that there was a very low confidence that Iran's nuclear material was in those targets by some people in the media. There's a belief that Iran has other unknown nuclear sites that we did not know about, didn't know where the locations were, didn't drop bombs on those. And Iran themselves have said that their program and their nuclear material is safe. I think all of those things can be true at the same time, by the way. But still, Donald Trump says, nope, we bombed these sites, and we did it. We achieved our goal. We stopped them from getting a bomb. Okay, Israel and Iran, stop shooting now. You don't have any reason to continue what you're doing. And Iran calls Qatar and sends them a message that, hey, in so and many hours, we're going to return fire on a U.S. airbase, which happened to be a base that was almost empty, and that pre-warning gave us enough time to get our people to shelter and out of the way of the attack so that Iran conducts a symbolic return fire. And then after that, Israel tries to kind of keep the fight going, and Trump has to tell them, no, turn your planes around, no, we're done. Everything's over. And I've seen people saying that, well, Israel wanted this. They wanted it to be over. I talked about this in last week's episode. They're running out of, counter battery missiles, which is absolutely true. But I don't think they really wanted to stop the war. I think they wanted us to be pulled into it, and they were pushing for an escalation to try to achieve leadership change in Iran. They wanted to bring us in and have us giving them missiles. Hey, we're getting beat up now. We can't defend ourselves. You need to supply us with more missiles. That's what they were looking for. And Trump said no. He publicly came out and he said, I'm not happy with what Israel and Iran are doing. They've been fighting for so long that they don't know what the F they are doing. And that's about the most biting public takedown of Israel from a U.S. president that we've seen in a while. I think Trump had his people work with Iran and kind of put on this show in order to remove the cause of the fight from Israel. And if I can just kind of speculate for a second, and this is, a wild speculation, no evidence to support this, it wouldn't shock me at all if we were in the near future to turn a blind eye to Pakistan giving Iran nuclear warheads for their missiles. We could say, well, we tried to stop their program, we bombed them, but look, Pakistan, that's very naughty, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have given them, but they got nukes now. I think the path to peace in the Middle East runs through Tehran and Istanbul. And it involves those two nations building a coalition that is a nuclear-armed nation. Maybe not single nation, but maybe a confederacy of some sort, an alliance. And they do that in order to balance out the insanity of Tel Aviv. Anyway, tell me what you think in the comments. That is all that I have time for this week. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab, Nice Crew, and the Cold Fury blog, and I will see you on the next episode.